Welcome everyone, Dr. Michael Lamas here for Teaching Subjects. Today we will explore two fundamental verb types in English, and that is the regular and irregular verbs. I will guide you through their patterns, expectations, and usage, all of which are essential for IELTS preparation and English in general. Okay, so let's start with the basics. So what exactly are verbs? So verbs are one of the most important building blocks of English sentences because they express actions or states of being. And anytime we describe what someone is doing or how something exists, we use a verb. So in English, verbs can change forms depending on factors like tense, mood, or the subject of the sentence. And this means that verbs helps us to understand when an action takes place. So whether it's happening in the past, the present, or future, and how it's connected to the person or thing performing the action. Verbs are categorized into two main types. You have regular and irregular. The key difference between them lies in how they form their past tenses. So regular verbs follow a consistent pattern, usually by adding ed at the end of the word, whereas irregular verbs do not follow this pattern and often require memorization. So in the upcoming sections, we're going to explore these aspects in more detail, helping you gain a better understanding of how to use verbs correctly and effectively in English. Okay, so let's take a closer look at regular verbs. Now, regular verbs are quite straightforward because they follow a predictable pattern when forming their past tense and past particles. So to change a regular verb into the past tense, we simply just add ed to the base form. So for example, the verb walk becomes walked in the past tense and play turns into played. Now this consistency makes regular verbs relevantly easy to learn and use because the rule is simple and applies in most cases. The simplicity of these rules means that once you understand the pattern, working with regular verbs becomes much easier. And in the next section, we're going to show how irregular verbs differ from this pattern and why they require more attention. Okay, so unlike regular verbs, irregular verbs don't follow a predictable pattern when forming the past tense or past particle. Now, this makes them a bit more challenging to work with because the changes from the base form to the past tense and past particle can vary greatly. So, for example, the verb go changes to went in the past tense and gone as the past particle. Similarly, eat becomes ate in the past tense and eaten in the past particle. So as you can see, there's no simple rule to follow here. And because of their unique form, irregular verbs need to be memorized individually. So there isn't a one-size-fit-all rule here, which is why it's important to familiarize yourself with the most commonly used irregular verbs as you build your vocabulary. Okay, so now let's discuss regular verbs in action with some detailed examples. So regular verbs, as we've mentioned, follow the simple rule of adding ed to the base form to create the past tense and past particle. So in the sentences, notice how verbs follow this pattern, right? Okay. So first sentence is, I played tennis yesterday. Second sentence is, she talked to her friend last night. So in both examples, the verb played and talked were formed by adding ed to the base verb. So play and talk, showing action that happened in the past. Okay, now let's look at the past particle form in use. So they have visited the museum twice is the first sentence. And for the second sentence, we have, we had completed the project on time. Okay, so they have visited the museum twice and we had completed the project on time. So here, visited and completed are the past particle forms of regular verbs. They are used with auxiliary verbs like have and had to express completed actions. And these examples show how regular verbs are consistently formed and applied in different contexts, making them easier to use once you understand the pattern. Okay, so now let's look at the irregular verbs in action with some detailed examples. So as we discussed, irregular verbs don't follow predictable patterns, so their past tense and past particle forms have to be memorized. So here are some examples of irregular verbs in sentences. Right, so if we start with the present form, we have examples like go, eat, see, write. For example, I go to the gym every morning. She eats lunch at noon. They see the sunrise from their balcony. He writes in his journal every night. Right, so when we use the past tense, we change words. So for example, she went to the market, the verb go becomes went in the past tense. If we say he ate dinner last night, the verb eat changes to ate in the past tense. So notice how the past tense verbs here don't follow the typical ed rule, which is what makes irregular verbs so tricky. Okay, so now let's see how irregular verbs are used in the past particle form. Okay, so in this sentence, we have seen that movie before. Here, see becomes seen as a past particle. And then for the next sentence, they had written their essays already. Write becomes written as the past particle. In these cases, the past particles are paired with auxiliary verbs like have and had, because irregular verbs don't follow patterns. Using them correctly means understanding each verb's specific form, and that's something that the IELTS examiners will pay close attention to. So now let's review some key irregular verbs that you'll need to know. And these are common verbs that are used frequently in both speaking and writing English. So it's important to memorize their form. So here are some few examples, okay? So go changes to went in the past tense and gone in the past particle. The word see becomes saw in the past tense and seen in the past particle. Begin changes to began for the past tense and begun for the past particle. We have the word take, which becomes took in the past tense and taken in the past particle. Then you have speak changes to spoke in the past tense and spoken in the past particle. Now each of these verbs has unique forms, and as there's no specific patterns to follow, it's essential to commit to them to memory. So knowing these verbs and how to use them correctly is important, especially if you're trying to improve your writing and your speaking skills. Okay, so let's go over some practical tips for using regular and irregular verbs in the IELTS writing sections. So proper verb usage is important to achieve a high score, and two important things to keep in mind are the subject-verb agreement and consistent tense usage. So first, the subject-verb agreement. So it's important that your verb matches the subject in number and person. So for example, he writes every day. This is correct because the verb writes agrees with the subject he. He write every day. This is incorrect because write does not agree with the singular subject he. So correct way to say the sentence is he writes every day, and the incorrect way to say it is he write every day. See the difference on that? Good. Okay, so the next thing is to be consistent with your tenses. If you're using the present perfect tense, for instance, the correct form of the verb must follow. So, example, sentence, she has gone home. This is correct because gone is the proper past particle form, right? She has gone home. In the other sentence, she has go home. This is incorrect because go is not the past particle form. So correct way to say it, she has gone home. And the incorrect way to say it is she has go home. So to sound more fluent in English, it's important to mix both regular and irregular verbs in your speech and your writing, and doing this enriches your language and also shows that you have a strong grasp on different verb forms. Now, selecting verbs that match the contents is important for clear communication, okay? It helps ensure that your writing is coherent and that your message comes across effectively. Now, being mindful of subject-verb agreements and tense consistency will help you avoid these common mistakes and also demonstrate strong command of English in your writing. And that, again, that's something that the examiners pay close attention to. Now let's look at some common mistakes with regular and irregular verbs. So one common error is over-regularizing irregular verbs. So for example, students sometimes write goed instead of went, or teached instead of taught. And another common mistake is confusing the past tense with the past particle form, right? So for instance, saying I have saw instead of I have seen, right? So the correct way of saying it is I have seen, and I have saw is incorrect. So these kinds of mistakes are easy to avoid if you're aware of them. So make sure to review your verb forms carefully. And additionally, individuals do not take the time to memorize irregular forms, right? So it's very important that you practice and also memorize irregular forms or irregular verbs. Okay, so now let's try to put this into practice. So one of the best ways to master regular and irregular verbs is through consistent practice. So let's start with a couple of fill in the blank exercises to reinforce kind of what we've covered. Okay, so I have two sentences here. You can either pause it and try doing it yourself, or if you want to follow along, let's follow along. Yesterday, she blank to the store. So you're going to need the correct past tense of go, right? Yesterday, she go to the store. That's incorrect. Yesterday, she went to the store. So here, went. Yesterday, she went to the store. Good. Okay, so now the second one. They have blank the test already. They have blank the test already. So they have take the test already. No, so here you would write they have took the test already. No, that also doesn't sound right. They have taken the test already. So here taken would be the correct answer. They have taken the test already. So remember, regular practice, especially with irregular verbs, will help you build your confidence and help you avoid the common mistakes. So the more practice, the better you'll get at recognizing using these verbs, their forms correctly. So just keep making sure you practice. So with that, I just want to tell you guys thank you for watching. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel for more content, visit us on social media platforms. And if you have any questions, comments, or need any kind of clarity on anything that I've discussed on the video or in other videos, please feel free to leave your questions in the comment sections. I respond to every single question. And thank you for watching.